Welcome to it. It's the Wednesday live Average Joe Sports Show podcast. That is Gary Sharp, Bill Doleman, Elijah Herbel, Chris Schmidt, and we welcome you in. We like the Sunday live so much. We said, hell, let's try a Wednesday because it is a fluid portal season, fellas. Guys, how we doing? None of us have jumped into the portal. That's awesome. Nebraska has had some recall, which is great. If you're a big Red fan, and oh my, there are names aplenty out there to add to your roster. None of us wore baby blue tonight. I'm kind of proud of that.
Hey, that's going to take a while to get used to.
Yeah. Is it nuts or what?
I think when you're desperate that you might not get a job, and a program is desperate to have relevancy, man, that is a marriage. But it's, now you got to see who he's going to have on his staff. But gosh, should we skip the Nebraska-Michigan game on September 20th and go to Orlando to see North Carolina and Central Florida?
Two coaches match wits in Orlando.
Maybe year two for both parties.
Well, why would you go? You already know what's going to happen. Walk-off field goal for North Carolina.
Oh, jeez.
13-10
after having a double-digit lead.
Man. Bill, beware of the onside kick.
The international incident lives on. Now it can be a Disney incident.
Yeah, of all the stuff going on. Remember that handshake gate thing?
Yeah.
How many years ago was that?
That's what it seems like with everything that's going on in Husker world and college football.
Yeah, you fast forward, not even 3 weeks later. But, guys, we've got schedules to hit for 2025.
12-0.
We'll do the look-see with some of these portal names. Emmett Johnson, maybe somebody will enter back in because that's been the trend when we've done an Average Joe Sports Show live show. But we do invite you to tell buddies about it, the Average Joe Sports Show on YouTube. Like and subscribe there. We thank you kindly for all the views we've had up as we make our way to 2025. Also, Spotify and iTunes, where you can download the audio portion. The AJ Sports Pod on Twitter is where you find us. So let's start.
We should say hello to Justin and Mike and Rhule today, and Charles joining us on the stream. It was only kind of a last-minute thing that we decided to do it live. We're doing it live. Yeah. So we put we raised up the bat signal and some folks responded. So that's pretty cool too. So welcome aboard.
I love calling out we call it starting five, but yeah, it's nice. Justin's just trucking along with us. Mike and Callie rule the day. Chuck says, good evening, friends. Good evening to you. And you know what? We'll hear from Matt Rhule tomorrow. John Butler is your new defensive coordinator, elevated. You've got Mr. Snow as the associate head coach. And Sharpie, going to get your take, too, on the Chiefs' defensive line has been elite for a long time. Nebraska plucking from Kansas City's defensive front and assistant. So that's pretty good work. Not official, but both those guys are in progress to be inked, right? James says Doleman just entered the portal.
And I'm announcing that I'm back, okay? So that's how quickly news happens around here, you know?
Hey, did 1890 get to you as well?
I wish.
They are welcome to, friends. Logo could go right there.
Hey, I am beginning an only portals account or only transfers account, whatever it is that can get me some money. I'm gonna, DM me for video or what. I'm watching on like Monday, whatever portal day was, and not that I know what the only thing is about, but guys are like posting that I'm in the portal. DM me for video. DM me for video. I'm like, what are they asking people to send them? It was just a little uncomfortable and a little sad, to be honest with you, because there were guys on Twitter just begging for coaches and schools, to ask for video. And I'm thinking there's got to be a better way that's less unseemly. It just was not a good look. But I'm back.
It is going to be a rat race to get down to 105 for a lot of schools. You need your two deep plus a few, and then your development / practice squad. Everyone's got to get to it. Coach Prime flipped it in year 2, where you got to go target the high school talent that can come in and help or have that short turnaround time to develop. And fellas, we'll go around the horn here. Wouldn't you say by year 2, you kind of know about a guy and either got to move on or hope they stay? This summer may be a little bit more clear with contracts and revenue sharing, where it can't just be a free fall, but it is it's brilliant by Carolina right now with Belichick, kind of that same Dion mold of, all right, let's bring a name and a brand to our school to make our school and our program relevant. Carolina's not that far down, all right, compared to Colorado, but kind of the Dion route for North Carolina. Nebraska going more heavy and aggressive in the portal, we presume, and they've been after it on the recruiting trail as well. So let's start with Keona Davis, though, and let's go there because that's one of those cornerstones we talked about and liked what we saw in limited action this year from Keona Davis, and a guy that found his way back, right? Again, the good folks at Nebraska who contribute to 1890, the good folks of 1890, and Nebraska making a move with their defensive side of the football, Sharpie.
Yeah, he's attached to Terrence Knighton. He committed to Washington, then committed to UCLA, then committed to Nebraska, and built a relationship with Terrence Knighton. And when he put his name into the portal, he's one of those guys that I did go, let's see here, because he's somebody you can't let get away. He showed you enough upside that he would fit playing defensive line in the Big Ten, and he's young enough. They didn't redshirt him. They played him 11 games. So he's somebody that you want to keep, especially on because Nebraska still needs to develop high school defensive linemen. And so I'm glad that, everybody kind of took a deep breath. They had a conversation. It's kind of like the path they went down with Emmett Johnson. Just take a step back. Let's have a discussion. What do you need? What do you want? Where can we go? What's going to be best for you? This is the plan. And then they move forward. With Keona, it sounds like, there was some NIL, and he'd be on my list of 5 guys that I would pay to keep. And then Terry Braden is an up-and-comer. That's an out-of-the-box hire, 34 years old, gets an opportunity to be a position coach at a Power 4. I'm sure that David Merritt, Dawson Merritt's dad, put in a huge recommendation for him because his dad sees him on a daily basis coaching with the Kansas City Chiefs. And then, oh, by the way, Kansas City during this run has had really good defensive linemen, and it's really a position under Rhule you've never worried about, defensive line. So I think all of that combination keeps a guy that was pretty important for Nebraska to keep, because I think there is enough there in what you saw this year that he looks like he fits in the Big Ten, and that's important.
I think he's one that this the Braden hire probably influenced rather immediately for him to go in, and then 24 hours later, after the announcement is made that you're bringing in a guy who is not the Kansas City Chiefs defensive line coach, but the assistant defensive line coach. But he's been there for 7 years, and he's coached under Andy Reid and Steve Spagnuolo. They've done reasonably well over the last decade, let's just say. I would think that if you're Keona Davis and maybe somebody else along that defensive line who might be thinking about leaving, maybe you realize that I can be influenced by the guy who has been influenced by the most dominant team in the NFL. I think that hire really probably spoke to him, maybe as loudly as whatever dollars they found to put into his pocket. So, and to get somebody generational too. I mean, 34 years old. Terrence Knighton's not an old grizzled veteran coach either. So that might speak to that generation of defensive linemen. And I think with him, and again, I keep saying Van Poppel is the cornerstone of that future defense. If they can keep him in the fold and now complement it with Keona Davis, and there's no talk about Cam Lenhart leaving, but who knows? But I think he's a pretty special player too that doesn't get a lot of run. So that's as depleted as Nebraska's defensive line seems like it could be. those are three pretty good players to be able to build around, I think, going forward.
And I think depleted's a word. I just look at thin. You've lost a lot of your depth there. But to flip it around, you talk about cornerstones. I agree with you. I think Keona Davis is a cornerstone for the defensive line moving forward. I think Van Poppel is. I think you could argue Cam Linhart is. Like, how do you feel about a front four on your defense? Cam Linhart, Keona Davis, Riley Van Poppel, and dare I say Williams Winery in the portal from Missouri. I know if not, you also have Willis McGahee, also another great young guy who got a lot of playing time. And just throwing the Williams Winery out there because I know a lot of Husker fans like what they see there and they think, oh, well, Nebraska's got a chance. But you might be thin, but you look at the guys that you have or potentially could have along that defensive line, and you say, you know what? Those guys all inspire confidence for the next 2 to 3 seasons of what this Husker defensive line can be.
Yeah. I think one thing in this whole discussion we have to keep in mind, your roster doesn't have to be to 105 until game 1. So we're going to go through this for a while. And remember, we'll have another portal window coming up in the spring. There's also something, the portal closes on the day Nebraska plays Boston College. But if you're in the playoff or playing a later bowl game, there's a 5-day window in January. So, I mean, it's still kind of fluid. And that's why it's tough to look at Nebraska and go, okay, they're going to be this, because there's still going to be some change. But the people you just rattled off, Elijah, I think that's a good starting point, considering that you're going to lose your 2 front guys. What it all comes down to next year on the defensive line, Riley Van Poppel needs to be everything we think he's going to be. And I think we're all in agreement that Riley Van Poppel, if he plays the way that he can and he gets more snaps, man, he's got a chance to be all Big Ten. Even if it's third team, I think he has that capability.
Gary, what's your take on the Chiefs' defensive line in Nebraska's, we anticipate soon to be announcement on Terry Bradden?
Chris Jones is out of eligibility, unfortunately. He expired that at Mississippi State. It's so let's go outside of the coaching part. I think just being in that culture, it's a winning culture. So you know what it takes on a daily basis to be successful, and you can relay that to your players. He's basically Terrence Knighton. People are saying, well, he doesn't have any recruiting experience. You know what he has? He has life experience where he can tell people, at 24, I was a high school football coach and an AD in the state of Florida. And for the last 8 years, I have been with the Kansas City Chiefs, and I've learned from Andy Reid, Steve Spagnuolo. I know what it takes to be successful, and I can relay that. And also, he's an up-and-comer, that probably would get plucked off of Kansas City staff. I think it's a great story. I really think it's a good hire because it aligns with, I think, where Rhule wants to go on that side of the ball. We'll get to the John Butler stuff, but you never have worried about Rhule having a bad defense. That's the thing. We wonder about Rhule's offense, especially from Carolina in the first 2 years, but defense we never really worried about because that's been a strength of his. And I just think it's a nice addition to kind of along the lines of what Terrence Knighton was. From everything you're told, because assistant coaches and even assistant defensive line coaches in the NFL they are ghosts. You don't, unless you're on the team or you're in the locker room, you don't ever hear from them, you don't see them. But everything out of Kansas City is, this guy is really well respected and is going to be a rising star.
And one of the questions I have with his time in Kansas City is, this is speculative on my part. What did George Karlaftis think of him? Because I know there's a Karlaftis in the transfer portal from Purdue that I don't think he got to shine.
Is he as good as Big Brother? That's my question.
I thought he was good this year. He was playing on a bad team, so sometimes it's kind of hard to evaluate whenever you don't have much talent around. But I thought he played admirably given the circumstances.
He's just not a fan of one-on-one matchups against Ramir Johnson out of the backfield. Little Orange Bowl flashback with the old running back linebacker matchup. But no, there's so many different dots to connect with the guys like Phil Snow or John Butler that have coached for 100 years, that have crossed paths with somebody in Detroit or may have GA'd for him that are some names we'll get to too for the secondary spot. But all right, we've got
real quick, Schmidt. You got to go back to something Gary said, and it's the F word. It's Florida, not just Fairbury.
I was gonna ask about
Shout out,
Nebraska.
It's-
Nebraska
you
invading
can
Florida.
recruit Fairbury all you want to, but I'm talking about the other fertile ground, and that would be Florida.
Yeah,
right.
Look like the hot dogs got in the portal from Fairbury.
I mean,
they are glorious.
Nebraska, look, it's not just like, hey, let's get one coach on our staff that's got a little tie to Florida. You know, in Nebraska is not one thing about Rhule and what the staff has put together. They're not afraid to go down there. They're not afraid of Miami. They're not afraid of Florida State and what they might try to build. They're not afraid of UCF. They're not afraid of the University of Florida. So they didn't get a recruit out of the Big Ten country this year, other than Nebraska. But Nebraska is saying, look, we are going to go head-to-head down there in Florida the best we can. And if we can steal 2, 3, 4 a year, and they did pretty well last year, that I think that is a significant hire too, because he was a high school coach in addition to, you know, having been at Bethune-Cookman and all that. So to me, that is just not like we're going to try to get a player out of there every year. No, we're going there and we're going to get some players every year.
You pair him with Phil Simpson and his track record in Miami, maybe a little Florida flavor if you go with a couple of secondary coaches we have names of that are also in Florida. Hey, Rhule and his crew have identified Florida as an area like the rest of the world that you want to recruit, but is it easier to recruit in Florida right now for Nebraska than try and make a living in the Big Ten footprint or even in Texas? And I know Texas ties are thick with Matt Rhule, and he'll never ignore that state. But right now, you've got some guys that are really connected down in the state of Florida. And guys, and Sharpie, you covered them, Florida high school kids not only are athletically gifted, they play a high level of competition year-round, but there's just a toughness to some of the kids when you think of like a Ja'Cory Barney, not only physically tough, but mentally tough. I mean, that's a really nice – if you're going to turn to high school kids to help sooner rather than later, that's a great state. That is probably the state to be in.
Yeah, I covered and seen plenty of Florida high school football, and it's the real deal. I think one thing about Florida kids, and when you win and they come here and have success, you can go back and win at the same place. Because if a coach is going to send his kid that far away, you better take care of him. Because if you don't, then you're going to get blackballed in that area of Florida. But one key thing, and I think this is a Terry Braden, and then even more a Phil Simpson. Let's not overlook, I think Phil Simpson's a really nice return to Nebraska, is they're not only recruit Florida, but they are from Florida. They've lived in Florida. The state of Florida, which I have lived in and still am a part-time resident, is much different than the state of Nebraska. And especially if you are an 18-year-old kid, there are things you see in South Florida that you'll never, ever see in Lincoln, and you're wondering where they're at. So I think it's when those low times, there's somebody on the staff that has lived it, has lived the Florida life that you can talk to, and they get it. They went a long way from home to coach at Nebraska. You're a long way away from home to play at Nebraska. We can relate. I think that was a problem. Remember, Nebraska had that good core of Florida kids that all departed during COVID because they had no one they could talk to and they were a long way away from home. I think that's important. And then I think it's important to get Florida guys and keep them together, that they can be in the same class and they bond. Look at the Miami guys, and this week, all of them kind of in unison saying, I'm in, I'm in, I'm in. And oh, by the way, there are going to be some key guys, not only on December 28th, but moving forward, whether it be a Barney, a Shavers, a McGahee, or whoever you'd like from the state of Florida.
Did we freeze?
I think,
What happened?
And we're back.
hey, Schmitty.
It was
I heard Schmidt's mic click, and I thought that meant he was going to go in on something.
okay. So Mama came home and she's on the phone rather loudly. So I was trying to mute. The dogs know that Mama's home, and it's what. Well, okay, she's bitching now that I'm doing it at the kitchen island. She doesn't understand acoustics clearly, so she wants me to move out tomorrow. It is the Christmas season.
Portal giveth and the portal takes away.
What are you asking Santa for Christmas? Trip to the vet, and
Your wife put you in the transfer portal.
well, she did.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Those damn roster limits.
it's the bumpuses. They have not eaten yet.
But Gary, back to your point, whenever you refer to the things that you see in South Florida, you don't see in Nebraska. I mean, you got a beautiful beach at Holmes Lake.
Yeah. You also don't have people coming out the club at 4:15 in the morning and trying to get one more in before everything shuts down at 5 a.m. But that beach at Holmes Lake is pretty good. It is pretty good. Capitol Beach isn't bad as well. But I don't think it looks like the Atlantic Ocean if you're Ja'Cory Barney. That might be a tough sell. He's like, I'm smarter than that, coach.
There's no midges or green algae to contend with.
Yeah, there is. And also you don't have alligators.
Sure.
You know that's one of the things.
Iguanas.
Do we have iguanas in Nebraska?
Pythons.
No, I will tell you something. Real quick story here. One of the first things in the first winter I went through in Florida, the geckos freeze and then they fall out of the tree. And then when they warm up, they come back to life. That's quite the scene when you see them falling out of a tree and hitting the ground. And then once they warm up, they're back to life and they scurry off. I don't think we have that in at least Omaha.
The catatonic life of the iguanas.
I think I've seen that similarly on O Street, roughly 1:45 in the morning.
Oh, nice.
Go catatonic on the park bench, and then you're up at 30 minutes later, scurry off.
Yeah, I'm glad we're telling personal stories, Elijah. I like this.
All right, Tales from O Street on the next Average Joe. Let's spend a moment on Nebraska's elevated defensive coordinator, John Butler, and based on social media, our different shows, and the glory of the StreamYard. Not a popular pick, but I'm going to see how the bowl game goes. And if Phil Snow's part of this, it is something that can work. It can work because of all of all of the manpower you're going to have on that side of the football.
Don't you find it? It seems like there's a triumvirate over there of defensive coaches as to who's going to be in charge. And I get the sense that, and we've mentioned it before, the Dana Holgorsen is the offensive head coach, and offense is not Matt Rhule's forte. Probably likes to be informed and involved a little bit, but not anymore. That's going to be the Holgorsen wing of the Osborne Football Complex and Club Husker. But with Phil Snow coming in and having been around sort of the program the last season, and now Butler being elevated and not having been around for 6 months yet. And I don't remember the relationship between Matt Rhule and John Butler anyway going into last season, if that had very deep roots. And then you have Matt Rhule, who at his heart, and admittedly, is a defensive guy. So is Butler really going to be in charge? Is Phil Snow going to be the defensive coordinator supervisor because of the role of the title of associate or assistant head coach? And then Rhule, who's not going to be allowed probably on the offensive side other than to know what's going on.
Hey, Dana.
Is Rhule more involved? Is Rhule more involved in defense now? So who's in charge over there?
I think it is. What I will say, though, is you've had a year together, a season together. Even though he was a consultant, you still had Phil Snow kind of giving his feedback throughout the season. You've had that. Butler's
that relation goes back for years.
Right.
But Butler, Snow, and Butler and Rhule, what are the roots of the relationship?
Here's what I want. Get it handled. Phil's going to be along there to prod you along. That's kind of my thought on it.
I think you're right. People that are upset about John Butler being promoted, and this was the plan all along. I mean, Evan Cooper screwed Nebraska. That's just the bottom line. I mean, Evan Cooper would be the defensive coordinator here. we wouldn't have the defense not meshing, even though they did enough to allow you to win more than 6 games. They never really meshed from the front end to the back end, because I think there were a lot of cooks in the kitchen, and they made some decisions on the different type of defense they're going to play. But this is Matt Rhule's defense. Like, think about if everybody wanted a splash hire. They went stability and familiarity over a splash hire. And we all have different definitions of splash hire. Rhule told you that he likes this system. He likes this defense. And so this is Matt Rhule's defense. And he just needs somebody to execute it. And I think, so if you're upset, be upset at Matt Rhule. But as you mentioned, Schmitty, and Elijah and Bill, and we've mentioned kind of with when Phil Snow was introduced to our lives about a month ago, is John Butler and Phil Snow will be together. So Snow was the DC at Temple and Baylor, and for the 7 years, they had a top 20 defense. I don't worry that Matt Rhule is going to have a team that is bad defensively. He just doesn't have that track record. Now he has a defensive coordinator in the college level that hasn't been a defensive coordinator in the college level in a long time. And he's got this veteran guy who doesn't need to go out and recruit, but needs to kind of oversee things, help a little bit with the game plan, help John Butler, what he can do to command that room when he stands up in front of him. And they'll all be like co-defense. But I think it's Dana Holgerson's the head coach of the offense, John Butler / Phil Snow are the head coaches of the defense, and Rhule can transition to the CEO, and it's an NFL model. That's what this staff is. It's an NFL model. And that's kind of maybe where college football is going.
Let me ask you this. Is Matt Rhule, CEO's right, and I get that. Is he positioning himself as the general manager? Because, they have Sean Patton. I get that. But with the move of Stanford bringing on Andrew Luck, and that's been a topic, probably topic 5 this week about general managers and what that's going to look like in college football, is that going to be the rule for Rhule, the role for Rhule, to be the general manager and talking about things like salary and player pay and roster, managing and development in that regard, so that, he's CEO, but de facto that he has positioned himself to be the general manager of Nebraska football.
I think so, but as hands-on as he is, and as admittedly being the control freak he is, it's going to go his way. His voice will be loudest because he is the head coach, but it is going to be old hat with him and Phil Snow because of their history. And then with Butler, there's Rhule's talked about wanting to work with somebody before you kind of take that long-term plunge, and you had Butler come in, so they know. I think Rhule probably kicked tires on some other names out there, but fellas, with the immediacy of the portal, you really couldn't wait any longer. I think you made some calls and you waited a week longer than you had to, just to see if there was any feedback or interest. Now, some of the names that Nebraska may have been looking into or getting ready for bowl season or in the playoff, or Rhule just said, look, I'm going to see who goes. I'm going to see who stays. And his backup plan from the get-go, once Cooper left in July, go get Butler, see if Butler works out here in this first year. Let's see if we can elevate him. And then let's move Phil Snow in. My question is this: you can go hire a corners coach and a younger guy that's a go-getter in recruiting, Florida ties. Phil Snow has been excellent with safety play in his career. So there's that part of it. You've got Simpson at outside linebackers. You have Braden at defensive line. You still have Dvorak at linebacker. And you can have a lot of eyes on pretty key position groups, all position groups, with more than just one coach managing the whole group. And I like that. I like having a defensive line coach and an outside linebacker / rush end coach. That reminds me of Nebraska's past staffs, specifically the Osborne staff. 2 offensive line coaches, 2 defensive line coaches, because it's the most important part of the football team, that line of scrimmage.
Yeah, I think you're unlimited now. the only restriction is how many guys you can have recruiting.
Mhm.
But on field, I mean, you have as many guys as you want. I'm glad you brought up Rob Dvorak because I don't want him to get lost here. That's going to be a young group of linebackers, and he is an extremely talented young coach. So if you look at, if you look at with a spot to be filled, it's a very interesting position, defensive position group room of coaches that are all relatively around the same age, that all have an NFL background or have a major connection to Rhule. So I also think they have aligned the defense. When I saw that Butler and Snow had been promoted, Phil Simpson had come back, it seems like there's a lot more alignment on defense, where this is what Matt Rhule wants, and he's going to put the right people in there, and then we're going to go from there. The defensive back job, I think, would be very appealing because you have a group of young athletes. Does the person have to have a connection to John Butler so you're familiar with maybe what Butler likes to do, and coach a position where Butler, was pretty successful in the NFL? But it's going to be a key hire because if they're going to stick with the true 3-3-5, 5 of the 11 guys on the field are defensive backs. So you have a big chore. Phil Snow has worked with safeties. I'm sure he'll dabble. Adam DeBichelle has been on the staff this year. He worked with safeties. Will they go get somebody that is a known name, or will it be like an up and comer that has an NFL background that'll slide right in? And I'm sure that if that's the case, David Merritt, who is not leaving the Kansas City Chiefs, will probably have a name or two for Rhule that they like, that as a young up and comer that has NFL background.
2 names to throw out with Florida ties. Addison Williams. He's the defensive coordinator and recruiting coordinator for Gus Malzahn at Central Florida.
No longer.
What did we say, Elijah? He was a GA for Butler, wasn't he?
Mm-hmm.
He was a graduate assistant for Butler. So maybe that is someone to listen for. Brandon Harris out of Florida Atlantic. Booker T in Miami is kind of his stronghold with his dad coaching there. Those are 2 Florida ties if we're going to continue to invade Florida from a recruiting standpoint with all of that. But those are 2 of the secondary names to look out for a corner spot, perhaps, and corner safety.
From my research, up and comers, both of them, Florida Atlantic guy, Schmidt, you remind me of his name real fast.
It's Brandon Harris.
Yeah, he spent a couple games as the interim defensive coordinator this season, and down at UCF. Other guy?
Well, it was Addison Williams at UCF.
Yeah, he also spent a season as defensive coordinator at UCF. So you look at those and you think up-and-comer, Florida ties, names that make sense.
So have we started the Nebraska thing already? Is that
Oh,
on t-shirts?
yes.
I mean, I spent a lot of time down, in that Pensacola area, so I'm familiar with the Floribama line and the bar and all that. So,
did you ever run into Edo and Destin?
I did not. No. No.
I'm just asking.
By the way, very underrated vacation spot, Destin, Florida.
Yeah, I'm pro that.
I mean, I hear it is, but never been invited to go. So, I mean.
Don't you think that Matt Rhule was hiring, had an eye when Tony White was flirting with San Diego State and UCLA, that when he hired Butler way back then, that was what the idea that he was perhaps hiring the next defensive coordinator?
Yeah, this was the plan. They thought Tony would leave after this year for a head coaching job. They didn't think he'd leave for a defensive coordinator job. But the plan was Tony White's gone. John Butler gets the first crack at it. And now they've got a whole season to work with him. I think when the season is over and the roster management changes, I would like a little bit of a dive into why they seem to have so many cooks in the kitchen on defense. There's not like a drastic change in terms of stats and performance, but it just, gosh, I almost think the defense should have been better this year. And there's a plethora of reasons, from injuries to guys basically shutting it down that were supposed to be your frontline guys, and then you shut them down, to just not making plays. It was a weird year on defense, I think. And they can't, and they, they'll be, you already knew there were going to be a transition in 25. They were going to be a little bit younger. I think it'll be an exciting defense because you're not necessarily certain of what you have, but they'll be faster. This will be one of the faster Nebraska defenses next year.
Do you worry with the roster size now about being able to rotate as many guys as you did on the defensive line?
Well, does it depend on what kind of defense you're playing? Tony liked to rotate a lot of guys. Like, it wasn't like Ty Robinson and Nash every Saturday were playing 60 snaps. I wonder if that changes. But I think one thing changes about the 105, and I heard you and Elijah talking about this, is the red shirt is over.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, unfortunately, outside of offensive linemen and some defensive linemen, you better get on the field in your first year because they got to see if you can make it to the second year. And then you got the portal. Guys will be like, I had 1 year, I'm out. If you're going to be a developmental program, you're probably going to have to develop on the field instead of off the field as redshirts.
Well, with the 105, you simply don't have room. If you have a 24-person recruiting class for 16 of those guys to be redshirts, I mean, now you're playing with essentially 89 guys instead of 105 for the year, and that's just, you can't do it. So I'm with you, Garrett. There's a couple guys that can probably be redshirted every single year. You're a handful. But I'm wondering if we're going to start seeing guys like post-spring football, pre-fall camp that are incoming freshmen that the coaching staff says, you know what? We don't have time to develop you.
We missed. See ya.
I'm wondering if that's going to be a reality. If you're really crunched with that 105, if you look at a guy that says, hey, this guy might be ready in 4 years after a redshirt, we get 2 years out of him. You might have to say, hey, we need you to go develop somewhere else because we simply don't have room to develop you right now.
Your film was great. Go show it somewhere else.
And I don't think that would be I don't think that'd be a common occurrence, but I think coaches got to keep it in their back pocket if there's really bad misses on the recruiting trail, which they do happen. Really bad recruiting misses happen. Are you going to have a hard conversation after a guy's been on campus for 4 months and say, you know what, I don't think this is going to work out?
All part of the contract you signed.
Well, and I think we're probably, that's for another episode of the Sports Show. But I think we're probably headed there eventually when things go in-house of guys signing contracts, like two-year contracts, probably.
What happens when there's a season-ending injury, though, on this 105 limit? And you're talking about a health of players anyway. Nebraska had two significant ones, with is it Demetrius Bell? They were all high on him as a receiver. He goes down in the spring game.
Bell.
And Prohaska. Season ending. Okay, so we're at 105 now. So now you've got two season-ending knee injuries or whatever. If there was another one that I missed, you're down to at 103, 102, 101. And in the interest of player safety, you really can't, hey, let's get you along. Let's see if we can't get you back. The NFL, it's that meat grinder that you have a knee injury for week one. Can we get you back for the playoffs? But you're telling, getting out the college level, we got to get you back on the field, or we need to play somebody perhaps before they are ready to play, or go with a lesser roster. I just think what are you going to do to get to 105 if you have season-ending injuries like Nebraska did with a couple of guys they were going to rely upon? That's where I say club football is the answer. And I patented it, trademarked it, and we'll implement it. But I think they're really, in the interest of player safety, you're telling guys to play a lot more snaps perhaps than they maybe should. And now when you're asking them to play perhaps 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 games, they're going in the wrong direction if they're talking about player safety, player health.
Yeah. Don't you think we'll see a lot more crossover? Maybe a lot more is not the right word, but guards are going to learn how to play tackle as well. Cornerbacks are going to learn how to play safety. Inside linebackers, outside linebackers. Maybe you get lucky and you get not to the level of Travis Hunter. That would be really lucky, but a wide receiver / defensive back. This is where guys play multiple positions in case something like Bill alluded to happens and a guard can slide out to tackle or, maybe a tackle can slide inside the guard. Where I worry about depth is like your long snapper, your punter, your place kicker, your center. Positions where you usually probably just carry one or two when you have a full roster. Now you have to make a decision of how many punters does Nebraska want? They have Washington's punter for the last 2 years going to be on campus this weekend. Nebraska kind of needs a punter in the portal. Bushini could be a big loss. Camden Cook is still here and he's ready to go. But don't you got to carry 2 spots for punter, 2 spots for place kicker? The center also needs to be the long snapper, the backup long snapper, all of those kind of things. Like that's where a guy like Harburg making the transition to playing tight end can also slide back to quarterback. He can be your H-back. He could be a long snapper. He could, you need that Swiss Army knife guy on every roster, maybe.
Give me a backup quarterback that can play nose guard, defense, center.
That might be Harburg.
Rest in peace, Aaron Lorenzen.
Yeah.
Hefty lefty.
Yeah.
I just the 105 is I think it's so unhealthy for the game in so many ways. You're denying people an opportunity to play, for one. I mean, it's in the name of the organization, collegiate athletics, and you're telling kids that, hey, you can't go to the college that you want to go to be an athlete. So go someplace else. I mentioned it on the last show, what that's going to do for APR and graduation rates. But also, you're asking players to play a ton of snaps. And it's always been said that until they're ready, physically for the rigors of pro football, that's why the college game was at 11 for so long. Yeah. And then they added 12 and they were worried about 12 for player safety. And then 13, and then playoff, all that. And now you're saying we're going to limit the number of players you can have playing the college game at an institution in which they want to go and are willing to pay, and say, no, you can't go do that. But we do want you to go to that institution and play as many plays as you possibly can for as long as you possibly can. And we'll see how well your body holds up.
And
it doesn't make sense.
And I'm also pretty convinced that somewhere down the road, more college football schedule expansion is going to be coming. With the TV partners running college football, eventually they're going to say, you know what? All this money we're paying you for the Big Ten, we want another conference game, 2 more conference games. I think it's coming. I think we're going to eventually have probably a 14-game regular season. You hope that comes after collective bargaining so all the conferences can get together and determine this is how many conference games we're going to play in a season. But I think that's got to be coming somewhere down the road because the NFL, they discussed it for 10 years to move to 17 games. They finally got it across the line just to get some extra dollars in the pockets. Eventually, it's going to come to college football too, where TV partners are going to want some more money. Whenever you as an athletic department have to pay out to your players with the revenue sharing, you're going to want more ticket sales. So maybe we can get an extra home game with a 14-game schedule. I think it's coming. If dollars and cents are running college football, how do you get more dollars and cents? You play more games. I think that's going to be coming eventually.
Well, you start winning at the level you're supposed to be winning at Nebraska. Not only will you be able to hit up seat licensing, but also make that give till it hurts very real. And I know A.D. Dannon's not doing that now, but Nebraska gets into contention at some point that they want to start hitting up NIL, a minimum donation as part of your season ticket package. I mean, we're talking about funding things. And
well, we're headed NIL is going in-house.
Yeah.
So that'll change some things. Here's the thing about winning. There's not really transparency in NIL funding. They're not public. So you see numbers and you go, well, Nebraska sucks. And then you're like, well, there's probably some, I don't know, there's in between, but there's no transparency of how much Nebraska spends on NIL. You heard North Carolina's football NIL has gone from 4 million to 20 million. If Nebraska wins, the faucet turns on.
Yep.
Granted, we're in a state of 1.9 million. But this is Nebraska football. If you win, the faucet turns on. Have you not seen what Indiana has just done? Indiana's money that has been raised for their collective is pretty damn impressive, and they won. That's why, next year becomes vitally important because not only are you in the world of NIL, Nebraska was set to host a linebacker today, Phoenix Johnson from Fresno State. They really liked him. He was going to be their first visit. He never made it to Lincoln because he got more NIL money to go to Auburn. Nebraska needs to win. The faucet turns on, but they not only need it for the NIL to compete in today's world, but also you got a monster stadium project that is a couple of weeks away from being announced. So the onus on rub-a-dub-dub in 2025 is monstrous. Because I do believe if Nebraska football, and this is where the college football playoff, guys, gives you hope. We don't know what Nebraska's full roster is going to look like next year. We've already went through the schedule in 2025 and went, Jesus, they might be 10-0 going to Penn State because we talk ourselves into that. I'm being a little bit sarcastic here.
You're already there.
But the playoff gives you like more access from the Big Ten and gives you hope that you could have one of those seasons. And I'm telling you, if Nebraska has one of those seasons, they're going to be flush with cash, but they need to have it sooner than later.
Oh, they absolutely got to have it sooner to keep the roster intact, right? Guys want to play for a winning program. And then Bob Devaney back in the day singing, it's better to give than receive. I mean, just he's giving you a hug and he's grabbing your wallet. God love him. As Bill's bringing his his rolling bar back into the office that Billy D used to restock.
Guys got a job to do,
Yeah.
Got to get through college somehow.
Oh,
Hey, Barry, more ice.
Oh, why did they change the name of the town? Shower center.
God, the TAM.
Give me a whiskey shower.
We need to immortalize the booth there that he used to go hang out in.
He was, but the Bob Father was one of a kind.
Absolutely.
Maybe we'll do a show in the off season where we can all just tell stories of our favorite former Nebraska athletic directors or employees.
That'd be all right. Let's talk schedule as you kind of led into it, Sharpie.
How great was it today to have a schedule? How awesome.
Love it.
I mean, you guys have already, everybody's figured out what trips they're going on. Start the year in Kansas City, end the year at Memorial Stadium on Black Friday against Iowa.
Doleman, you want to go get COVID again in Minnesota?
Well, I figured, I saw that Nebraska's making its annual trip to Minneapolis or every other year without Minnesota coming here.
I love going up there. I love doing shows like 6 years
Minnesota
in a
ever
row
going to come here and play again? That's all. It's Nebraska's just perpetual road game is always going to be at Minnesota.
So because this was asked, I got this asked on Twitter, that the Minnesota trip in Rhule's first year was the old schedule. And so that's why they're going back to Minnesota without a return trip. So that's why you get back-to-back trips to Minnesota.
They'll be coming to Lincoln in 26, theoretically.
Which I love Minnesota. By the way, for the record, I think Nebraska, for the first time in the Big Ten, got a schedule the way it's laid out that is very beneficial.
To add to your Minnesota point, it's also Michigan's second straight time coming to Lincoln. So the scheduling weirdness it gives and it receives. So I'll let that one lie. You can personally catch me. I'll be in State College in November. I might freeze my ass off, but I need to go check that stadium off the old bucket list.
It's Siberia, bro. Good luck getting there.
Yeah. Hey, by the way, if it is snowing, good luck driving on that 2-lane highway from State College back to the major interstate. If you're staying in Harrisburg, it's scary as fuck. I'm telling you. I'm sorry. I just turned into the McAfee show, but I had a horrible experience, and I was white knuckling it the whole way after Pat Smith kicked a game-winning field goal in overtime. I mean, it was scary. But do you guys think that might be the whiteout?
Completely. NBC night game, snowy weather. The old Pat Smith 2.0. I remember that, man. That was a hell of a Kenny Bell kickoff return. It's big time.
I think it'll be a whiteout as long as Nebraska is not fighting, chasing 6. If Nebraska's already caught 6 and is chasing maybe 9 or 10, then it might be their whiteout game or, primetime NBC. But if it's chasing 6 again in late November, it's a peacock game.
Well, let's be clear.
Big Ten will grab that bad boy and still throw it on at night.
You can't figure, especially with some of the flexing that goes on late season. Also considering we don't know probably 10 to 15 guys that are going to be on Nebraska's roster just yet. Like, I can't dive too deeply into the schedule with all the unknowns that are happening between now and the bowl game, and then the bowl game and spring football. What does your 105 actually look like? The coaching carousel hasn't stopped spinning. It's nice to get the schedule. I think it looks like, as of right now, it sets up well for Nebraska. I just don't think we should put the cart in front of the horse here and start talking about, man, the Big Ten finally took care of Nebraska, because we said that last year too. And then you look at Indiana, who's a college football playoff team, and who saw that coming, and Illinois going 9-3. Like, there's so many unknowns that you won't know until like the start of fall camp and then the start of the season and then halfway through the season, that I'm not willing to say, man, the Big Ten finally did Nebraska a solid.
Elijah, Doleman, and Sharp, we've already made reservations in New Orleans for the playoffs and the semis. Brother, where's your faith?
Here's the deal. We do know this. The schedule sets up for Nebraska to chase and catch 5 midway through the season. It's the drama that's also going to be set up, much like it was this year, to chase 6 and perhaps 7. So the early part with that game against Cincinnati, wherever they're going to play it, maybe they'll play it in Berlin with the NFL opener. I don't know, but Kansas City, is that the likely destination?
Yes.
Yeah. So, and then you got 4 straight home games. I thought it was 4.
Yeah. You go Akron, Houston Christian, Michigan, and then you got Michigan State.
After about,
you don't go on the road. You don't go on a true road game until October 11th.
Yeah, so that sets up to chase 5 pretty good.
Well,
then we got the second half of the season drama.
Hey, here's the thing, and this is the way that this is the Big Ten.
Love you, Black Hills, Brennan.
Hey, this is the Big Ten. Is November, you're going to have to be prepared. And once again, the last 2 years, Nebraska has been absent in November. Once again, 2025 sets up as pull up the pants and prove your worth in the month of November, because you go USC, out to the Rose Bowl, bye week, to Penn State, short week, Iowa on Black Friday. If you want to be a serious program, then in November, you have a winning record.
So right now you're 1-7.
Yep. And this league is 1 in November. Look at the matchups. This league wants November to be remembered. And the teams that do well in November get remembered, because then they're playing in December when the stakes are a little bit bigger. But I think this is a good schedule for Nebraska, because it allows you to get off to a good start, especially when, on defense, you're going to have more questions than on offense. And hopefully you have momentum where it continues week to week. All I want next year is consistency. I root for an NFL team that people go, Jesus, you only won 19-17. You know what? The Kansas City Chiefs are the same team every week. They are consistent, and you have to be better than them to beat them. You can't be the same as them, and most teams can't be consistent for 60 minutes. I just want consistent football throughout the year and to get off the roller coaster. And if they can do that, then I think they're headed in the right direction. But I haven't seen that yet, and I need to see it, not just August 30th through October 11th. I need to see the same team that is playing well on October 11th, that same team on November 22nd, maybe under the lights of a whiteout at Penn State, for a game that could be like, wow, winner of this game has got a chance to be one of those Big Ten teams in the playoff. You can dream, you never know.
Playoff contention, and then how do you perform in that moment? Right? You have a chance to make a lasting impression late into the year and make your argument. Even if you do drop one, there's a safety net for you. Guys, it's been quite a funny day when it comes to the coaching carousel. We started by smirking about Bill Belichick going to North Carolina, between social media and the faith in Bill Belichick's ability to recruit. Just look at his girlfriend. I thought that was the funniest thing I've seen. Or the different 7-second clips, Belichick with the binoculars, right?
Mhm.
But I'm wondering if he'll rock the baby blue, or if he'll be the only guy in Chapel Hill wearing a little navy blue, accented by that Carolina blue, because we don't wear Carolina blue. It looks soft. I'm halfway joking, but 3 years, $30 million. And oh yeah, my kid gets to take over when I tap out. No brown M&Ms. I need 12 different kinds of yogurt, potato chips, an assortment of dips, nuts, and 12 Reese's peanut butter cups on ice, please. Read my contract. Thank you, David Lee Roth.
Look, I'm just glad North Carolina went younger. They got rid of Mac Brown, brought in a little
just by a year.
Yeah, they brought in that young guy, in Bill Belichick. This has all the markings of setting up Stephen Belichick for a head coaching job. It did, and I think that's what this is all about. It's an opportunity because the college game is going to the NFL. I think Belichick understood, look, I can probably do this as a general manager, CEO type. And why not? They're going to pay me a ton of money. It's a nice place, good school. They're more concerned about basketball. I'm 72. My kid's got the gig. Why not? Why not go do it right now?
Well, and get Carolina, as powerful as that brand is. Football rules the roost when it comes to inclusion in monster conference acquisitions. Colorado's relevant now because of who they hired, and they won 9 games this year. I think Carolina took a page out of Colorado's playbook here. Let's go get a big-time name. This guy being the greatest ever when you look at Super Bowl wins, to come back to the college level. So Carolina is going to be somebody that, if there is another round of consolidation and movement and poaching, Carolina is a team that you really do look at beyond basketball, clearly. But football now with Bill Belichick is always going to be interesting.
Yeah, I thought that this might also be a move for conference realignment by Carolina. Just saying, we want to be in with wherever we can be. Does this send a message to the SEC? I don't think so, but I think more with their sight set on the Big Ten, and makes that appealing. I agree with you. I think there's a lot of things at play for Carolina. They get a big splash now, but what's the ripple later? And does this set them up for an invite when the Big Ten and the SEC take this whole thing over, and the ACC is left with Stanford as its flagship institution on the West Coast, and SMU, Clemson? Who knows what's going to happen to them?
We shall see. Hey,
let me ask you this real quick. I know we're getting to the end, but is Nebraska done on the coaching carousel? We've talked a lot about the defensive side of the ball and the changes that have been announced. Is Nebraska done in that regard?
Here's what I wonder. No. When you look at John Butler, he has cut his teeth, and he's been a pretty high-level special teams coach. So does your defensive coordinator also take over special teams, or now that you can hire out every position, do you go get a different special teams coach? And with Easy Ed being the nacho cheese hot dog eating ambassador around the state.
So at the end of the month, EJ Barthel and Ed Foley's contracts expire. I think there's
Is that it? Those two?
Satterfield's contract goes through 2025, but you're not going to pay him if he remains on staff $1.2 million. There's not as many Power 4 jobs that have opened up that need new staffs. So maybe it's been a little bit slower. But I think if there's any movement on Ed Foley, Rhule will have professional courtesy and transition Ed into something else on the staff and hire a different special teams person, or, Brett Maher is on staff. But just keep an eye on those two. Their contracts are up at the end of the year. I think we're going to start to see a lot of contract information because we'll learn Butler's salary, and we'll learn, Marcus Satterfield isn't going to be making the same amount of money he was making. That's going to have to be an adjustment. So I think all of that stuff is to come here in the next month. But at the end of the month, is probably Ed Foley gets the Pinstripe Bowl, and then, Ed transitions into an ambassador or something along those lines. But I think Rhule will make any changes on his staff of guys exiting is just professional courtesy. Let them make it sound like they're transitioning into a better job.
Mm-hmm. Or
I'll also I know it's not necessarily coaching carousel because it's a guy that's been around. I still believe we're going to have Jamar Mosey in an on-field coaching role next season. So we'll see where he ends up as well. Because I think that is still coming, that Mosey will be on field in some capacity on the offensive side of the football.
Yeah, I mean, that would be, and that's a no-brainer for what he has done in a short amount of time in the Kansas City area and what he will continue to do. And remember, Elijah, you mentioned it earlier, a five-star prospect who only played 38 snaps, has got some issues on and off the field at Mizzou, is in the portal. I mean, it was a year ago, I think, to the date, where Eli Drinkwitz jumped in the arms of one of his fellow coaches to celebrate his commitment. His high school coach was Mosey.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe get out of Missouri, change the scenery, then you get to see what a dude was in high school. But yeah, you're right, Elijah. He's a guy that I think that was also maybe a plan. They would find an on-field position where he could also be part of that 10 recruiting.
Sure. Well, that's been fun, man. The Wednesday Live, we'll have to do this again midweek. Sunday Live is where you can find us next on the Average Joe Sports Show. Thanks to all of you who've tuned into the stream, subscribed on YouTube. Do it again. Tell a friend. Subscribe the Average Joe Sports Show on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes. Follow on Twitter. The AJ Sports Pod, Elijah Herbel, Bill Doleman, Gary Sharp, Chris Schmidt will talk to you this weekend with the Average Joe Sports Show.